Antonín believed that machines had souls. For 50 years, in the oil-stained silence of his workshop, he had listened to engines that cried, and those that threw tantrums like spoiled children. He lived where the road ended and the ancient forest began. To Antonín, the world was simple. If something doesn't work, find the fault and replace the part. He was a doctor of steel, a surgeon of iron. But on this night, the sky decided to tear itself apart. The thunder felt personal, shaking the very foundations of his sanctuary. Antonín was 70 now, his skin like weathered bark, his hands permanently stained with the black blood of 1,000 cars. He thought he had seen everything, but fate was about to bring him a malfunction for which no manual had ever been written. The headlights weren't white. They were a haunting shade of violet, cutting through the mud without a sound. No pistons, no combustion, just a silence that made the hair on Antonín's neck stand up. A black limousine, its paint drinking the light of his workshop, came to a halt. A man in a silver coat stepped out, moved like a ghost, and left a single note on the workbench. It read, "Repair it before the owner returns." His instinct told him to run, to lock the door and wait for the sun. But mechanic's curiosity is a dangerous thing. When he lifted the hood, he didn't find spark plugs or a radiator. He found a rotating geometric construct made of a metal that shouldn't exist. And there, on the inner plate, he saw the manufacturer's stamp, Model Aurora, made in Plzeň. Year 1982. Antonín looked at his old wrench, then back at the future, and he knew. The night had only just begun. Antonín stared into the heart of the Aurora, and for the first time in 50 years, he felt like an apprentice. This wasn't a motor. It was a captured star, held in a cage of shifting geometries. It didn't burn fuel, it burned time itself. He saw the manufacturing stamp again, 2085. A date that shouldn't exist for another 60 years. Was it a joke? A hallucination brought on by the fumes of too much gasoline? No, the heat radiating from the blue core was real. It smelled of ozone and fresh alpine air, a scent that didn't belong in a grease-stained shed in the middle of nowhere. He put on his magnifying loupe, his breath hitching. Even in the year 2085, the universe remained a stubborn place. Between two rings of light, he saw it, a tiny, jagged piece of ordinary quartz. A pebble from the road lodged in the celestial clockwork. It was a cosmic irony that a billion-dollar machine from the future could be brought to its knees by a single grain of dirt from a Czech village. "Well, you beautiful bastard," Antonín whispered, his voice cracking. "Even a god needs a janitor sometimes." His hand, usually steady as an oak tree, began to tremble. He knew that if he touched the blue light, he might be erased from history. He had to be surgical. He reached past the rotating rings, his old screwdriver acting as a lightning rod for the static energy. The air around his hand began to warp, blurring his vision. Time inside the workshop started to stutter. The clock on the wall sped up, the hands spinning like a propeller. while the rain outside seemed to freeze mid-air, suspended in crystals of liquid silver. With a sudden violent snap, the quartz popped out. Antonín dropped it as if it were a glowing coal. In an instant, the frantic buzzing stopped. The Aurora took a deep mechanical breath, and the blue light softened into a warm, golden glow. It was the sound of a satisfied predator, but the victory was short-lived. The dashboard flickered to life, projecting a hologram of a map. It wasn't a map of roads, it was a timeline. A red dot was racing toward the present date. A warning flashed in cold digital letters. Correction unit dispatched. Objective: anomaly elimination. The rain didn't just stop, it vanished as if the sky had been switched off. Antonín looked through the grimy glass of his window. Out of the shifting mist, 3 figures emerged. They wore long black coats that didn't catch the wind, and they moved with a terrifying rhythmic precision. 3 bodies, but only 1 heartbeat. They weren't coming for the car. They were coming for the witness who had dared to touch the gears of fate. As they drew closer, Antonín felt a coldness that no stove could warm. He looked at their faces, or where faces should have been. There was only silver. Perfect, mirror-like surfaces reflecting a world that was being erased. In those reflections, he didn't see himself. He saw his workshop burning, his tools rusting into dust, his entire existence being calculated as a rounding error in a future he wasn't supposed to know. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who knew how things worked, and he knew his shop. He knew which floorboard creaked, which chain was rusted thin, and exactly how much pressure the old hydraulic lift could take before it snapped. Antonín felt the old instinct from his soldier days crawling back up his spine. The future had the technology, but he had the terrain. He had 40 tons of Soviet-era steel and a lifetime of knowing how to break things that didn't want to be broken. He reached for the main switch. Click. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the amber pulse of the Aurora and the flickering blue light of his dying radio. Outside, the 3 mirrors stopped. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They just stood there, vibrating at a frequency that made Antonín's teeth ache. "The owner is back," he muttered to the shadows, gripping the cold iron of his wrench. "But if you want this car, you're going to have to pay the shop rate. And my prices are lethal." The steel door didn't break. It wept. Under the touch of the first care-writer, the heavy iron simply ceased to be solid, dripping onto the floor like mercury. They stepped into the darkness of the workshop, their mirror faces scanning every shadow. They saw a world of rust and grease, a primitive cave belonging to a primitive man. They didn't see Antonín. He was part of the machinery now, his breath synchronized with the slow drip of oil from the ceiling. He waited until the lead corrector stepped onto the grease-stained X on the floor, the exact center of his kingdom. With a roar that shook the forest outside, Antonín pulled the release. 40 tons of cold, unyielding iron descended with the speed of a falling star. The first corrector didn't even have time to flicker before the hydraulic press obliterated its form, pinning the liquid silver to the concrete. But the others didn't flinch. The second one raised a hand, his fingers elongating into whips of razor-sharp chrome. It slashed through a rack of wrenches, turning steel into confetti. Antonín dived behind a stack of tires, the smell of burnt rubber filling his lungs. "Come on!" he spat, grabbing his old arc welder. "Let's see how you handle some real heat." The workshop became a cathedral of sparks. Antonín struck the arc, creating a barrier of 10,000 degrees between him and the mirror-faced butcher. Every time the liquid metal touched the electric arc, it hissed in agony, its silver surface boiling into black soot. Antonín moved like a dancer in a graveyard of cars. He kicked a barrel of old transmission fluid into the path of the third guest and ignited it with a shower of sparks. A wall of orange flame erupted, separating the future from the past. He wasn't just fighting for his life, he was defending the integrity of his craft. He scrambled into the cockpit of the Aurora. The opal key felt like ice in his palm. As he turned it, the geometric heart of the car didn't just spin. It sang. A high-frequency howl that shattered every glass bottle in the shop. The remaining correctors hesitated. The magnetic field was so intense it began to peel the paint off the walls. "You want your anomaly?" Antonín screamed over the roar of a world ending. "Here it is! Take the shop rate and go to hell!" He slammed his foot on the floorboards, and the workshop didn't just disappear, it folded. The mirrors of their faces cracked, unable to reflect a reality that was being rewritten by a 20th century mechanic. When the dust finally settled, the silence was heavier than the noise had been. The Aurora was gone, leaving only a scorched mark on the concrete floor and a scent of ozone that refused to fade. Antonín sat against his workbench, his old heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against his ribs. The future had come for him. It had tried to erase him like a typo in a manuscript, but the old steel of the 20th century had held its ground. The shop was a wreck, but it was his wreck. In his trembling hand, he clutched a souvenir, a small brass gear no larger than a coin that had fallen from the Aurora's heart. He looked at it under the first rays of the sun. It was perfect. A piece of machinery manufactured 60 years from now, yet it felt familiar. He realized then that the future isn't some alien world. It's just the next layer of the work we do today. He lit a cigarette, the blue smoke curling into the morning mist, and watched the forest wake up. The trees didn't care about time travel. The mud didn't care about anomalies. And for a moment, neither did he. A week later, he locked the doors for the last time. People said the old mechanic had finally lost his mind, rambling about cars made of light and men with mirrors for faces. But Antonín knew the truth. He knew that somewhere, in the shifting tides of time, a machine was screaming through the void, powered by a heart he had mended with a simple pair of pliers. And he knew that in the year 2085, in a factory in Plzeň, a young engineer would find an old brass gear in a museum box. He would look at the crude, hand-filed marks on its edge and realized that the future didn't start with a computer. It started with an old man in a grease-stained shed who refused to let the world stop turning. Because every masterpiece needs a mechanic, and every future needs a past to build upon. Archive the day, Antonín. Your shift is finally over.